Hello and welcome to this presentation on discipline reporting. My name is Jonathan Escobar. I'm VP of Data Management for Bright Star Schools, and I'm going to walk you through this presentation. So some objectives for today. We want to acknowledge the pre-suspension conversation protocol. We would like for you all to understand the state and LUSD reporting requirements for discipline. And we want you to learn how to use assertive discipline within ARIES to do your reporting. We want you to know about the monthly reporting requirements to LUSD, how to calculate your school's suspension and expulsion rates, how to view your school's historical and current year suspension data, and we would like to share with you your school's goals for suspension rates for the 21-22 school year. So before we start, we want to get you thinking about discipline reporting as incidents that occur. So as this little visual provides here, an incident can be multiple things. It can be a discipline incident involving only one student who commits one offense. It could be one student who does multiple things with multiple outcomes, and it could be multiple students committing multiple offenses, which result in discipline in multiple discipline results. So before we get started, what is it that we report? So we must report all incidents in which a statutory offense, as outlined in Education Code 48900 and 48915, are committed, regardless if it results in a disciplinary action of suspension or expulsion. So some of you who may have been doing this for some time or have done this years ago, previously we were only reporting suspensions and expulsions. Several years ago that changed, so they were also required to report incidents that result in what are called other means of corrections, as outlined in Ed Code 48900.5. In addition, more recently, we're also required to report whether any incidents that resulted in either seclusion or restraint, which we'll go into in some time, even if those resulted in no statutory offenses. Even if no statutory offense was committed. Okay, so what are statutory offenses? So there is a list of them. And a statutory offense is any violation that is committed by a student as outlined in Education Code sections 48900 and 48915. There's a long list of them, and I'm not going to include those here, but there's a link. So if you click on this link on your own, you'll go to a Google Sheet that provides you with the name and description of each of those offenses. Okay, so in addition to suspensions and expulsions and other outcomes, there are what are called other means of correction. And so here's another long list. And I won't go through this list, so please feel free to pause. I didn't mention this previously, but you should also have access to the actual presentation with all the links. And so feel free to go pause this presentation now or go to the actual presentation and look at this slide. So these are the things that we hope are happening instead of suspensions and expulsions. So these are the types of things that are going to result in a better relationship between our students and our school community. And so feel free to go through this list, but we are promoting these types of things instead of suspensions and expulsions. Of course, recognizing that in certain situations, suspensions and expulsions are necessary. Again, in addition to suspensions, expulsions, other means of correction, there are also situations in which students might need to be secluded or restrained. And so seclusion is the involuntary confinement of a pupil alone in a room or area from which the pupil is physically prevented from leaving. Reasons for that might be for the students or other student safety. Another thing is restraint, and there's different types of behavior restraint. Mechanical restraint is the use of a device or equipment to restrict a pupil's freedom of movement. Physical restraint might be a personal restriction that immobilizes or reduces the ability of a pupil to move his or her torso, arms, legs, or head freely. So that could be the use of handcuffs for mechanical restraint or other devices, I assume. And physical restraint may be somebody actually physically holding a student so that they cannot move. We're going to go into how these are logged on ARIES, but just know that on ARIES, these are reported under behavioral emergency actions. Okay, so more about the types of outcomes or incident results. So you can have other means of correction, suspensions, which can occur in school and out of school, excuse me, expulsions, which could start with a suspension, and depending on the incident, there could be situations in which no action is taken, or in which a school-related arrest results, or a situation in which a law enforcement is referred but doesn't result in an actual arrest. And for each of these, there could be different lengths of time that are reported. So no days need to be reported for other means of corrections, but for suspensions, they do need to be reported. And for students who are expelled, you need to report the days that the student was suspended pending the expulsion, and then the expulsion length is the remainder of the time from the suspension through the end of the school year in which the student was not allowed to come to school because of that expulsion. And I also want to make sure that it's clear that there could be multiple incident results per student and per incident. So a student could be restrained physically and then eventually be suspended and then eventually expelled. So I talked a little bit, I think I might have mentioned about partial day suspension. So we're reporting everything in full days of suspensions for suspensions and expulsions. So in a situation in which a student is suspended and missed parts of a day, that is rounded up to a full day. And so I have a little bit of an example here for you. In this situation, a student is suspended, and that suspension happens midday through the day. That first partial day counts as one full day and is reported as one full day, and every subsequent day after that is reported as an additional suspension day. So in this case, Johnny gets sent home at 2 p.m. on April 26th, an hour before school is out. Well, that first day, April 26th, counts as one full day, and then April 27th is day 2, and that results in a 2-day suspension being reported. So some more recent changes that happened. One of the things that are listed on their statutory offense list is defiance or willful defiance, and more recent laws restrict the ability for schools to suspend students in grades K through 5 for committing defiance. From now through the end of the 2025 school year, so the same applies for students in grades 6 through 8. Charter schools are actually restricted completely from suspending and expelling students for defiance. At Bright Star schools, we do not suspend any students for defiance. And then there's this little bullet point at the bottom. Teachers have certain authority as an exception. In Ed Code 48910, do talk to your leadership about that if there is a situation in which teachers are pushing for suspension for defiance. Again, as I mentioned previously, before you get to the point where you decide to do a suspension, you are asked to review the pre-suspension conversation protocol. That is linked here. You've probably seen it before, and we'll continue discussions about it. I've just linked it, and this is just a reminder that you should go through and review that. If you go through this process and you decide to suspend a student, there's a document at the end of this document that you must fill out once you've decided to do a suspension. Okay, so next, expectations for logging these incidents in ARIES. You are We are hoping that you're logging these as soon as possible as they occur. However, recognize that you're very busy and lots of things happen. But we do ask that you at least log these on a weekly basis. So where do these get logged? They get logged on ARIES, our SIS, under assertive discipline. Every incident that's reportable to CDE or LUSD must be entered, and we've already covered what those are. They must be entered into ARIES assertive discipline. All students involved can be added to this incident report in assertive discipline, and assertive discipline allows for a great deal of detail to be included. However, I'm going to go over some of the few fields that are required. So what is required? I won't go through this full list, but just know that there's a place you can refer back to find out what things need to be, must be reported on here. And some of those things are applicable only under certain situations. So now I'm going to take you through a demonstration. I'm going to use an ARIES demo site to show you to protect student privacy. If you need to, you can go and click into this link and it'll take you to a guide that talks you through step-by-step on how to do what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to go into the demo site now. I'm going to provide a link in one of the next slides on the presentation to get here, but do know that you have access to all these demo sites that allow you to mimic the system for different users, and I'm going to go in as an admin, which is the way that you're going to be logging into ARIES for Brightstar. So the login screen, the first page is going to look a little bit different for Brightstar schools, but on the left hand side you'll see a familiar menu. Under student data you can find guidance, and under guidance you can find assertive discipline, and that's where we're going to log. So in this demo site, we have a student who has some discipline data already, and so you'll see some totals. You'll see the incident records that have occurred for this student, and you'll see a tally of the different outcomes and the number of days total that the student has for this year. And you'll see a tally of the merits, which we are not using at Brightstar. So I'm going to take you through adding a new discipline record. So I'll take you through each of these things very briefly, and then I'll go through a demonstration. So as you can see, there's certain fields that are indicated in green, and so those are your CalPADS required field. CalPADS is a state system where we report all of our data, including discipline data. So anything in green is required by CalPADS, the state system. However, there's all kinds of other stuff. And a couple of those things, as we indicated in a previous slide, we are going to be asking that you fill out. So going through just really quickly, you can find the date. The date will always default to the current date, but as we mentioned previously, you might be filling this out on a later date, in which case, if you are, make sure that this date is the date that the incident occurred. You can fill in the exact time it occurred. You need to make sure that you indicate the school, and it'll default to the school that the student is currently enrolled in. Leave this blank for now. Very important, do not enter anything in here. Once you've created a report, it'll enter the incident ID number, which is unique for each incident. The refer, if a person has referred this student to you, a teacher, for example. The location is optional. And then in here you have a list of the violations. These are the statutory offenses that we talked about previously. That list is included in here in the system, and you can enter multiple ones in here because it's possible that a student has done multiple things in an incident. When you're adding these as a list, make sure that the most severe one is added up on top, and in a descending order, the ones that follow. Brightstar Schools has a ranking of these severity that may be updated, so I'm not including it here. But if you by the time you reach one of these situations, you will have access to that. And if you have questions about a severity of offenses, do reach out to your supervisor. Okay, so if applicable, if a weapon was involved, we have to provide the code for that weapon, and there is also a replica option. But we have to include what type of weapon was used. You'll also notice here that there's a flag here for whether the student has an IEP. In this case, the student has an IEP. This green field is required. For students who have an IEP, you must indicate whether they did or did not receive instructional support when they were suspended. And down here, it's defaulting to nothing. But we are required to report whether the student was removed to an interim alternative setting, and that could be for multiple reasons. An alternative, excuse me, I don't have an example, but an example might be that a student was removed from the school to an alternate setting for protecting the student. Or keeping them away from other students. And so this is this very specific example. This isn't just they were removed from the school in order to go home, because that's just an out of school suspension. This is a situation in which there's literally a place where the student has been removed and is in an alternative facility. You do need to include a description of the incident. It's not in green because it's not reported to the state, but we do need for you to provide a description of the incident. When doing so, please be very careful with the language that you're using. Do not use language that gives blame or assigns blame to students or has any of your own personal feelings about this incident. Stick to the facts, keep it simple, but include all the facts that are necessary for this incident description. If you're using names, use acronyms for names of other students that are involved in order to protect student privacy. And once you're ready to do so, you'll add the administrative decisions or dispositions or incident results in here by clicking here. I'm going to take you through these other tabs that are up here along the top. A lot of other stuff in here is not required, but you can fill in. For example, if something resulted in a student, a law enforcement being notified, you want to go ahead and indicate that here, and you have the space to provide incident ID numbers, for example, for the police reports, and etc. If it comes to it, you will need to add a new expulsion record. There will be a box that comes up where you just need to add the details related to the expulsion. And then there's tabs for victims. If there were victims involved, they'll be listed here. If there were witnesses involved, listed here. And if there were other students involved in this incident, they will be listed here. This spot right here is where you'll add behavioral emergencies, which are seclusion or restraint. So that's an overview of everything. Now I'm going to take you through actually demoing it. So we're going to pretend that the student was found being under the influence of alcohol on campus. So this incident occurred today. I'm not going to answer the exact time. You could. This incident occurred at Screaming Eagle High School. Again, I'm not going to add anything into the incident ID. And I'm just going to add the location was the bus stop. So I'm going to click on this drop down, and I'm going to find that incident description. I'm just going to enter in here alcohol, use of alcohol. Oh, okay. I'm going to click on the drop down again, use of alcohol. Okay, so that's in there now. No weapon was involved. The student was ultimately suspended, and so in here I'll put yes, we provided instructional support for the student, and there was no removal to an alternate setting. I'm going to write in here a description, very brief. Student was under the influence of alcohol, and I'm going to go ahead and click on save. Alrighty, the next thing I want to draw your attention to is that now an incident ID has been generated by the system. Okay, so next thing, as I mentioned previously, is we're going to add an administrative decision. We know that the student was suspended out of school, so I'm going to go ahead and find the code. This list is very busy. For your school, it's going to be much smaller, and it'll only include the ones that are pertain that need to be reported. So I'm going to go ahead and choose suspension. I'm having a little bit of trouble finding it in this really crazy list. There it is, suspension. And this student was suspended for 2 days. Let's just say for today, for this example, the student was found being under the influence of alcohol at lunch, and that, as we previously said, the student was suspended for all of tomorrow, and because the student was sent home halfway through the day today, we're going to count that as a full day, so that equals 2 days total. Again, today was the day that this occurred. It happens to be the 11th. And the system knows that because we are suspending the student for 2 days, the student's suspension end date will be the 12th, and the student will be allowed to return to school on the 13th, because it knows our calendar. And if this was happening right before a weekend, it would say that the next day the student would return would be the following Monday. And the authority for this is school or district personnel were the ones that determined the suspension. I'm going to click on save. Okay, so now this has been added to the student's record. So I didn't previously state this, but in this situation, there's actually another student. And that other student actually did the exact same thing, and the result was the exact same thing. We suspend that other student for 2 days. So there's this cool feature here that allows us to copy. So I'm going to click on copy. It's going to look for all the students in the system, and I'm going to say, oh, there's a student. It was actually Alice Abdo. So this student was the other student involved, the exact same thing, and again, same result. So I'm going to say we're going to use the same incident ID, and we want to copy the corresponding discipline records, if any. So I'm going to go ahead and click on copy, and it's now going to tell me alert the discipline and disposition records were copied for 1 student. I'm going to click on OK, and now I want to draw your attention to the other violators tab. And so currently it's blank because it's just populating it. I'm going to click on this to kind of force it to happen. Okay, so now we know this incident in which Alan Abbott was involved, there was another violator who did the exact same thing. That student is right here, Abdo Alice, and now she's showing up. If you were to go to her profile, the same thing would show up, but it would be Alan who would be listed under other violators. So I want to also point out that I forgot to add, in this situation, unfortunately, Alan needed to be restrained for his safety. So I'm going to click on this drop down. We needed to physically restrain Alan, and the staff that deemed this necessary was a school employee. Reason is not necessary, it's actually blank, so just go ahead and don't do anything there. I'm going to click on save. And so now in this situation, we've done filling it out for Alan. All the details are on this page. The other violators listed here. And in this case, again, the student had to be restrained. A bit of information that I forgot to point out was that there was actually a witness involved. And we're going to add a witness to this. Unfortunately, you can't just click into the witnesses tab and add a witness. This will only list the witnesses once they've already been added. In order to add a witness, I need to go and do that on the witnesses menu here on the left. But I want to do a little quick shortcut. I want to make sure that I copy the incident ID because everything is linked by incident IDs. So just a really quick tip, go and copy the incident ID number before you go into witnesses. In this situation, this student right here, Alice, a different Alice, Abdel Noor, is actually the witness. And so I'm going to add a witness report here. So this incident ID I copied previously, and I'm going to go ahead and search, and there it is. It's this incident right here. I'm going to go ahead and say that's the one. I'm going to click on it, and now we are adding this witness statement for this incident. School of incident we know was Screaming Eagle High School. Incident happened at the bus stop. And this type of witness is an eyewitness. The student noticed what was happening, and it's confirmed. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save. So now let's go back to asserted discipline. Let's go back to view that page for Alan Abbott. Here is the incident we just created. Now, in addition to there being other violators, there's also somebody witness listed under witness. I do want to point out weird little asterisks happening here. In order to protect those students' privacy, the system will by default hide those details until you go in here and you click on display witness info or display other violators info. That's just protecting their privacy in case, for example, you're meeting with one of these parents and showing them the details. You might not want to disclose who the witness was or who the other violator was for that student's privacy. So that's everything. So I've entered all the information necessary in the system. I'm going to jump back into my presentation. Okay, so we've completed the live demo. Now you're viewing this recording and we want you to get some hands-on time. And so I've embedded a link into the demo site for you to go and test this out yourself. I want to ask you to go ahead and create an incident report in the demo site, just the same way that I did. Use a different incident type code, different students, and go ahead and test this out for yourself. Pause while you do that, and then come right back here and resume once you've completed that in the demo site. Okay, so you've gone through that and you know how to add an incident report onto Aries. The next thing I want to talk about is our expectations for reporting to LAUSD. The district requires us to report on a monthly basis all of our suspensions and expulsions by school. So on a monthly basis, we're going to require you to do that reporting. So whether that's you or a designee, somebody will need to, on a monthly basis, submit our suspension and expulsion report to the data team via Google Drive. I don't have that folder linked in here because for student privacy reasons, you'll get access to your own school's folder shortly. You probably won't get it by the time you're viewing this recording, but by the time you need to submit your reports, you'll know what folder they need to go in. All this information is provided to us by LAUSD. They haven't done so yet. They do it on an annual basis, probably within the next week or two. You'll receive an email forward from us, which will include the template in Excel, the instructions, and the deadlines provided by LAUSD when we need these to be reported. And more details will be coming shortly. So now we want to talk about, okay, so we're logging all these things. So what happens next? Well, suspensions and expulsion rates are generated. They're published yearly by CDE. LAUSD and other stakeholders will be reviewing these. So what are these suspension and expulsion rates? Want to make sure that we are clear that students who are suspended or expelled multiple times are counted only once. And so sometimes, obviously we don't want to be reporting, obviously we don't want to be suspending students multiple times. But just know that if they are, they're only counted once for suspension and expulsion rates. When reporting, again, incidents are defined as one or more students committing one or more offenses on the same date at the same time. Expulsion counts include all expulsions, even those expulsions where the term of the expulsions has been shortened or enforcement of the expulsion has been suspended. So even if we go through all the proceedings and in the end we decide to suspend an expulsion where the student is allowed to still return to school, that is still considered an expulsion in the eyes of the state. So that does get reported. So here, this slide goes into the actual calculation of suspension and expulsion rates. So here's the formula. So we take all the students who are suspended in the year or all the students who are expelled, and we divide that by the cumulative enrollment. So that means a count of all students who are enrolled at any point in the school year. It's not a point in time thing. It's literally all the kids who are enrolled in your school is a denominator, and the numerator is the number of students who are suspended at least once, or the number of students who were expelled at least once. And you divide those two numbers and you multiply by 100 to get your rate. Here's an example. In an imaginary school, 5 students have been suspended in the year. It just happens to be that one of those was suspended multiple times. And there were 500 students who were enrolled at any point in the school year. Now your suspension rate for this imaginary school is going to be 5 divided by 500 multiplied by 100. So the 5 is those students who were suspended once, at least once, Again, one of them was suspended multiple times, but we're not counting them multiple times. We're still saying only 5 students divided by the cumulative enrollment of 500 multiplied by 100. This imaginary school suspension rate for the year was 1%. So where is this information reported? It's reported in multiple places. One of those is this website called DataQuest. It's state of California's website where they do a lot of the reporting, and so you can go ahead and click on this site. I won't take you through it, but when you get there, you can select the level of school and the subject of suspension and expulsion rates, and you'll be able to find for your school, for the district, for the state, the suspension and expulsion rates, and you can also break that down by different demographic levels. And so you or anybody, this is public information. This report happens at the end of every year, and that information is published sometime in the fall, and everybody can get access to it. The next thing, impact of suspension reporting, is that accountability measures by the state. So the state of California has what they call the California School Dashboard, where multiple indicators are reported: academic and culture, non-academic, other things depending on the school. Excuse me, the school level, elementary, middle school, high school. Those are reported on the California School Dashboard, and one of those indicators is the suspension rate. I'm going to take you into that, and again, I'm going to do a really quick overview, and feel free to just follow this link and go and check it out yourself. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I'll use LA Unified as an example. And 2020 is a bad year to use because of COVID. It wasn't reported in the same way. But I'm going to go back to 2019, and you'll see all of the indicators. One of those, again, is suspension rate, and for LAUSD specifically, their indicator was blue. It's reported in different colors, as you can imagine. Red is bad, and blue is good, and in the middle is this range, right? So in this situation, the indicator is determined by two things: the current status, or the suspension rate for that year, which in this case was 0.4% for the 2019 school year, and what change happened from the previous year to that year reporting, and in which case the student, LAUSD is deemed to have maintained their status. They saw a decrease of 0.1% from the previous year, and that just is a marginal, very, very small percentage change, and so they're considered to be maintaining. And so without going too much into the weeds, schools we want schools and districts to be either maintaining or improving year over year, and so there's this whole metric that you'll see about what what change and what actual rate will correspond to on this color scale. But additionally, if you click on view more details, you'll see that for the district, all the colors are listed here, and they're also, in addition to that color that you saw previously, all of the major subgroups are also put into a color as well. So not just the color for the entire school, but how each of the major subgroups did. So in LAUSD's example, although the whole school was in blue and a majority of their subgroups were also in blue, two of their major subgroups, African American and foster youth, were actually in a lower color. So as you can see here, none of them were in red, orange, or yellow, but for your school or for other schools and other districts, you might see that there is a difference between the full school and where individual subgroups lie. So you can get all that information from this California School Dashboard. Again, I encourage you to go through and check it out for your school. And I'm going to go back to my presentation now. Okay, so in addition to what we've all covered, you're also, there's also a link in here to view your school's 21-22 suspension rate goal. So leadership has set a goal for the 21-22 school year based on the previous suspension rate that has been reported for your school. So not going to do it right now, but do click this link and view your suspension rate goal for your school, because that will be something that your school, yourself, and your whole school community will be expected to meet in the coming school year. Another reason why it's really important to make sure that you're logging your suspensions and expulsions and incidents of other means of correction is that those counts are going to be reported on our counseling dashboard. The link for that is not in here yet because we are most likely going to be refreshing that for this school year. But when it becomes available, the link will be updated here and you'll get access to it. Just know that a lot of stakeholders, a lot of staff members, administrators, school support team staff members will be looking at your school's counseling dashboard. And one of the indicators on there also will be a count of suspension rates and a count of other means of correction. And we'll be having conversations with you and other school administrators about how your school is doing, again, with regards to your suspension rate goals. And so just the counseling dashboard and other dashboards that bring in suspension rates and other data with regards to discipline. We're expecting that those things are being updated on ARIES on a frequent basis, again, at least weekly. And if those counts are not updating, so we'll be reaching out to you to make sure that you're logging those things. So that takes us to the end of our presentation. Just know that there's multiple ways to get more help. We do want to encourage you to review this presentation however many times you need, the recording and these slides that will be shared with you. But also know that ARIES, again, has a document that goes through in detail how to do this. I've also embedded the link for a full long two-hour long presentation on discipline and interventions. We're only doing assertive discipline. We're not doing interventions for discipline on ARIES, so the whole presentation is not necessary, but there's an ARIES trainer who's walked us through discipline as well. You can also contact your cluster data team for more support on logging these things on ARIES. And then additionally, if you have other questions, non-ARIES related, about suspensions and expulsions and other means of corrections and everything else dealing with discipline, do make sure that you reach out to Michael Hoover and Aja Moore, and you should have the contact info for them. So feel free to reach out to them directly. And I'm not on here, but my name again is Jonathan Escobar, and you can reach out to me if you can't get any answers by following these steps. So feel free to reach out to me as well directly. And that's it for the presentation. So thank you so much for being engaged and making sure that you're logging all these things, because it's very important to have accurate data in order to take action. So again, thank you so much and have a great day.